Hi everybody, I hope that you're all doing really well. So today I am back to do the Christmas Traditions book tag. This was originally created by Reading with a Vengeance. I always like to do a Christmas tag every year just to put myself in a bit of a festive mood, even though I'm not really wearing something that is particularly Christmassy today. That was a bit of an oversight on my part. And also this is the first video that I am filming in my new room. So I'm still kind of working out how to film things in here. The setup, like what's good to show in the background, the height of my tripod and everything, and especially because we are in the winter months now. I know that the lighting is probably going to be atrocious, but hopefully this is all okay for you. But getting on to the first question, we have red, gold and green. Show a book with any combination of those colours on the cover. And because I've recently done a bit of a splurge on Christmas books, I had a couple of options I could show you actually. First off, we have Home for Christmas, which has red, gold and green. These are just a few little short stories by A.S. Byatt, Michael Morpurgo, Lenny James. Just did a little thing, and look how pretty it is. And then we have a German Christmas, which as well as having red, gold and green, we have blue and brown, and yeah, that's pretty much it, isn't it? So hopefully these fit that prompt. The second question is caroling. What is your favourite Christmas carol, and pick a book with a title that includes a word from that song title. Honestly, I think that my favourite Christmas carol might be Carol of the Bells. I think that's purely from the fact that I used to be in choir at school and it was my favourite song to do. So I've kind of shot myself in the foot because it's not a very long song title and it already has the word carol in it, and a Christmas carol seems a little bit too easy. Bells. I mean, the bell jar. Does that count even though it doesn't have an S at the end? For Whom the Bell Tolls. Once again, no S at the end. Also wanted as much as possible to go for books that I have read. So A Bell Jar and For Whom the Bell Tolls are my answers. Question number 3 is Christmas trees, wreaths and evergreen foliage. A book that features nature as a character. The first book that came to mind was Lanny by Max Porter, but then when I was thinking more about it, I decided to go for The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak. This is a multi-generational story taking place partially in Cyprus. It flits back and forth between the two generations, but as well as focusing on the parents and the child in this family, there are also some chapters which come from the point of view of a tree that was growing in Cyprus that they took with them to England. I always thought that was a really clever concept, albeit a bit unusual and not really my typical read. Question number 4 is holiday cards. A favourite epistolary novel that you read this year or want to read next year. And at first I thought that I didn't have an epistolary book that I read, so a book that features letters, until I realised that I did read Dracula by Bram Stoker this year, which is told via letters, diary entries. I think that might be the only book that I've told that is in that format, but it was definitely a favourite. It was a solid 4-star book. Review of it down below. And I actually really like the way that it's told. You're getting to have lots of different perspectives, but it also means it's quite a limited perspective, which I think you need for the mystery aspect to stay fresh. Question number 5 is Mistletoe, a book that features unrequited love. There was one option that came to mind instantly, but I wanted to kind of steer away from it, and then I ended up looking online and all of the examples that it was showing for examples of unrequited love were unrequited love that ends up being loving at the end, where the two characters end up getting together. And I didn't want that. I wanted to stick with an unrequited love that stays unrequited. And so I had to revert back to the original answer that I thought of, which was Marius and Eponine from Les Mis. I mean, it's a classic, isn't it? Also with the musical version, Eponine as the unrequited teenage heroine. Every teenage girl thought she was Eponine at one point or another. And so I had to go for it, even though I don't really like that relationship too much. I'm also not very keen about the way that people hate Cosette because of this unrequited love between Marius and Eponine. Especially after reading the book, like it's very, very clear from the book that Marius does not care about Eponine at all, whereas the musical, they try to make it a little bit more mutual. That's not how it was in the book. He just finds her annoying and inconvenient, and the only time that he shows her any sort of like, oh, you are more than just an object, is when she's dying in his arms. And then he's like, oh, I guess I kind of feel bad about this. Okay, what's happening with Cosette now? Like, that was not romantic. It wasn't. Question number 6 is Santa Claus, a book that features a character who's not really likeable but endearing anyway. Somebody has some unresolved feelings about Santa. In terms of one that I read this year, and a character that I actually didn't mention in my review of this book, quite a standout character from the book Essex Dogs by Dan Jones was the Earl of Northampton. And that's because even though none of the higher-ups are particularly likeable, they're really, really not. The Earl of Northampton is just so irreverent and really quite funny. He is quite laddie, and I can't quote anything that he says because it's just swearing all the time, but I did find him really funny. And just the way that all of the other nobles are taking themselves so seriously and he doesn't, and he does feel comfortable poking fun at the royalty and the nobility and being like, yep, this is ridiculous, but this is what we gotta do. I ended up finding him quite not endearing, but enjoyable by the end. Question number 7 is Nativity Scene, a family-based historical fiction. A book that I read this year that definitely includes that is Still Life by Sarah Winman. This is more of a found family dynamic, but most of the story is focused on Ulysses and his found family that he ends up bringing over to Italy. Seeing this family kind of grow up, especially the adopted daughter, and how they live, how they end up thriving in this new environment. And it's just really lovely. Question number 8, Elf on a Shelf, a book on your shelf that catches your eye all the time but you never pick up. Is that not just all of my books? I mean, really, I have 3 books that are on my TBR that have been like the highly anticipated releases from this year that I really should try and read before the end of the year. I don't know if it's going to happen, but every time I see them, I think, oh yeah, when am I going to read that? And those books are The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell, Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes, and Joan by Catherine J. Chen. I mean, just look at them. Like, they catch your eye. They're all like a sort of historical fiction that I'm really, really interested in. That always seems to go down well with me, so I just need to read them. Question number 9 is Christmas movies. Favourite adaptation or a book that you would like to see adapted? I do actually have quite a lot of favourite book to film adaptations, and it's definitely something I should do a video on. And especially I think I should do a video on films I actually think are better than the book that they were based on. This one isn't necessarily like a favourite book to film adaptation, but one that I do think fits in as one that is better than the book it was based on is Catching Fire, based of course on the second book in the Hunger Games trilogy. I don't know what it is, but this just made the story of Catching Fire just so much more interesting, and especially made the end of Catching Fire make a lot more sense than it did when I was reading it. That may have been my reading comprehension when I was 16, but like the final plan, and especially how Katniss ended up getting out of the arena, just never made sense to me when I was reading it, but when I was watching it, I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense, I understand now. In terms of an adaptation that I would like to see based on a book, I mean, it is me. I would really, really like to see Matilda Empress Queen Warrior made into a TV series or a film. I mean, just generally a film about Empress Matilda. And now I'm in 2 minds as to whether or not this will ever happen, especially because of the success of House of the Dragon, which the Game of Thrones lore is based upon the Anarchy and on Empress Matilda's claim to the throne of England. It is a spin on that. So what I'm hoping is that House of the Dragon might make people more interested in the Anarchy, and maybe people might cry out and say, yes, we want a film about Empress Matilda. Alternatively, what could happen is that people look at House of the Dragon, think, okay, well, we've done that story now, and then never look at it again. And that would make me sad. Question number 10 is Ugly Sweaters, a book that made you laugh out loud. Every time I read a book that actually does make me laugh out loud, I always think I need to keep a note of that, so that I'm not in this situation where I'm like, wait, what did make me laugh out loud? Because that doesn't happen too often. My go-to answer for this is always This Is Going to Hurt by Adam Kay, because that definitely made me laugh out loud. But for one that I read this year, or I reread it this year, is Troy by Stephen Fry. There are just so many instances where I was listening to that audiobook that just made me laugh. I think it's just purely because of how petty these characters are, and how kind of transposing them into more of a modern, more colloquial language that we would recognise and how we would speak today just really highlights that. I mean, it's definitely there in the more traditional Greek myths, but I feel like Stephen Fry really, really draws it out. Question number 11 is Eggnog, a book that you love that everyone seems to hate, or vice versa. And for this, I am going to go vice versa and go for a book that everyone else seems to love and I hate, and that is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I do not understand the hype on this one. I did not like it at all. I'm kind of baffled that that won the Women's Prize for Fiction this year, and honestly I do think it's just like the Women's Prize for Fiction honouring her previous work, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, because that book did not do it for me at all. And then finally, question number 12 is Exchanging Gifts, a book you read this year and thought this would be perfect for insert person here. I mean, the easy answer for me on this one is Rest in Pieces, The Curious Fates of Famous Corpses by Bess Lovejoy, purely because the reason that I ended up picking this up was because I was shopping with Sylvie and Shannon, and I saw this book in the history section. I picked it up and I actually gave it to Sylvie, saying, oh, you should definitely read this. This seems perfect for you. She didn't end up actually buying it, and so when I realised she wasn't, I decided, oh, actually, I want to read it. Mine. But having actually read it now, what I said originally still holds true. Sylvie, I think you would really enjoy this. And actually any of the books that I've read recently that are to do with like the history of death, I think she would get on board with. So there we go. Those are all of my answers to the Christmas Traditions book tag. I will be sure to link some people down below that I also tagged to do this video. But of course, if you look at this video and think, I would quite like to do that, then feel free to say that I tagged you. Otherwise, just let me know any of your answers to these questions in the comments down below, because I would love to hear from you. I hope you're having a fantastic, fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.